All right, today we are going to go back and start to use models again. But this time, in place of fractions, we're going to look at how we can use base 10 blocks to multiply decimals. As we're going through this, kind of thinking about, we have three basic blocks that we're working with. We have the flat piece, which in this case is going to equal 1 whole. We have the stick, which is going to represent 1/10 because it takes 10 of these to make one of these. And then we have our little itty bitty baby cubes, which are going to be 1/100th because it takes 100 of these to make our whole. I have started one of these for you, kind of going back to what we did with fractions. We're going to look at what happens when we multiply a whole number times a decimal. If you remember back with our work with fractions, we talked about groups of. So here we can see 4 groups of 6/10. So we used the models on the braining camp. And here we just see 6 sticks, 6 sticks, 6 sticks, and 6 sticks for 4 groups of 6/10. Now, if you did not want to go in and use the actual manipulatives from the app, you can also just draw them. And we're just going to use lines to represent the sticks. And now we can just count. So if I have 4 groups of 6/10, I have 4 groups of 6, which becomes 24/10. And 24/10 is going to be the same as 2 and 4/10. And the reason that happens is if every 10 make a whole. So we have 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then we would start another one. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then there'd be 4 extras that had not made up a whole. All right, so we're going to do another one. 2 groups of 1 and 3/10. So if you remember, the 1 is the flat, so I'm going to go ahead and draw that out. So my first group of 1 and 3/10 is going to be 1 flat, and then it's going to be 3 sticks, and that's my first group. And then I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to do a second group of that. So 1 and 3/10. And my answer is going to be the total. So here I have 2 flats, so that's going to be 2. And then I have a total of 6/10. And when I add those together, my answer is going to be 2 and 6/10. All right, why don't you pause the video and try the next one on your own. If you remember, 3 times 1 and 25/100 just means 3 groups of 1 and 25/100. So once again, I'm going to start out. I'll start with my 3 groups of 1. And then I'm going to have my 2/10 in each group. And then this time, I get to add in my 5/100. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now, these are all my groups. And I'm going to add them up. So I have 3 wholes pictured with the decimal point, so it's like 3. And then for my tenths, I have a total of 6. And then for my hundredths, I have a total of 5, 10, 15 hundredths. And now I just get to add all those up. So I can add in those zeros. So we have 5. And our total is 3 and 75 hundredths. You might not need to write out the actual part like this. I just think it's a good visual so you can kind of see how everything's put together. And remember, whenever we add decimals, we're always going to line up those decimal points. All right, so that's how we do a whole number times a decimal. But what if we end up doing a decimal times a decimal? Our models are going to look a little bit different because we're actually going to work with an area model. So I'm going to kind of show you what that looks like. I'm going to make this screen a little bit bigger. We have set up the first one for you. On our first one, we have 2 and 1/10, which we see right here. So we have 2 wholes and 1/10 times 1 and 3/10, which we see over on our horizontal axis. And now we're just going to fill in with the biggest piece possible, or we're going to kind of take piece by piece. So here we have a 1 times a 1. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in a 1 piece there. That's going to be the same thing right here. And now I have 1 times 1/10. So that's just going to be a stick. And then if we look the other way, it's kind of the same thing, but we're going to use the ones across the top. So I have 1 times 3/10, 1 times 3/10. But now we've got this little part right here. Now I can't fit any more sticks in there. So when I take 1/10 times 1/10, actually you're going to end up with our hundredths. So it's going to be 1/10 times 3/10. So we end up with 3/100. And now I just add it all up again. So I have 2 wholes. I have 3, 6, 7/10 and 3/100. So it'd be 2 and 73/100 as our answer. All right, let's do one more together. So I'm gonna go ahead and slide this over. We're gonna look at 3/10 times 4/10. Now, be very careful because sometimes what'll happen is when people start putting tenths, especially if they haven't put a 1, they'll lay them this way across the top. But if we laid them that way, now it's taking up the space of 1, and we want it to take the space up of 1/10. So on our part up here, I'm going to put 3/10, so it's just going to be 3 sticks. And then on the other side, we're going to have 4/10. So I'm going to put them the other way. Okay. And now, because I have 1/10 times 1/10, and this is a lot nicer with the actual physical manipulatives, we're going to fill in with our hundredths because the sticks would not actually fit. So when I take 3/10 times 4/10, you can see we have an array of 12, but this time it's 12/100. So our answer is going to be 12/100. All right, why don't you pause the video and try this last one on your own and see how you set it up, and then you can check it. All right, so here we have 1 and 4/10. So I'm going to start with that. I really like to use my color just to help my pieces stand out. So here's my 1 and 3/10. And then, 4/10. And then along my up and down or my vertical, I'm going to put my 3/10. All right, so 1 times 3/10 is just going to be 3/10. I'm just go ahead and fill this in here. And then when I do tenths times tenths, can only fit in the hundredths. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in those pieces. So what is my final answer? So I have in my blue sticks, I have 3/10. But if I have 3 times 4, if you remember from last time, that's the same as 12/100. So just kind of keep our color coordinated. So my blue pieces are 3/10. My yellow pieces end up equaling 12/100. I'm going to just add those pieces together. So now, add in that 0, you end up with 42/100. All right, on the second page of your notes is going to be your individual practice. So now you are going to complete this side on your own and then submit your work once you are done. Please reach out if you have any questions and make sure you are using your models to help you. And just remember, if you'd rather, you can also go to the Base 10 Block app, which we can talk about in class, or you can use the Braining Camp, which are linked in our Schoology page as well.